Very tight schedule. I want to welcome you here, and I want to express the appreciation of all of us to Mayor Young for joining us, and to Gene Young, who's also here. We have a very tight schedule. Is Ms. Curry from the Daniel Hill Williams Society? Would you like to just step up and express a word of welcome?
Good afternoon. To our distinguished guests, Mr. Andrew Young and Reverend Dr. Paul Smith, to Dr. Sherrill, Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Green, Dr. Finberg, to our faculty, our students, and other guests. On behalf of the Daniel Hill Williams Society, I'd like to thank you for coming, express to you our concern, our deep gratitude that you're here and that you are interested in minority health issues. On behalf of the members of Daniel Hill Williams, which is an organization of minority medical students dedicated to addressing the concerns of our underserved communities and populations, we're actively involved in community health fairs, tutoring and mentoring high school students, and scholarship programs, just to name a few. We'd like to again thank you for coming. We are committed to meeting the challenge of the 90s, and your presence here today supports our efforts. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce the president of the SUNY Health Science Center at Brooklyn, Dr. Sherrill, who will introduce our speakers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marino, and I'm going to be equally brief. Mayor Young has a plane to catch, and he has squeezed us into a very busy schedule for which we are deeply grateful. Andrew Young is not someone, he's one of those people who, when he speaks, genuinely needs no introduction. He's held many important posts of service to our country and to his state and community. He was an aide to Dr. Martin Luther King in the fight for civil rights. Under President Jimmy Carter, he was ambassador to the United Nations. He is the former mayor of the city of Atlanta, and now he is the Democratic candidate for the governor of the state of Georgia. Andrew Young.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here and to see my, I should say friend of long standing, but truthfully we are old friends. Charlie Green, David Dinkins, and I were in school together. In fact, they helped me into the fraternity, and they were sort of real role models of mine. That means they older than me. But Dr. Green particularly, I always used to sit there, and anytime he got up to speak, it was an experience because he was so in love with language, and I think that was sort of a fraternity tradition of ours, something that I was afraid to be bothered with. But after working with Martin Luther King, I kind of got into it too. I won't get into it this afternoon, though. It's dangerous to ask me to talk to a group of people who are really struggling, and I'm running for office, and I'm pretty soon going to have responsibility for the health care of the state of Georgia, and I'm always thinking about what we can do different. Not criticizing anything that's being done, but if everything was being done right, we wouldn't have any problem, or if it could not be done any better. And so I began to think of what would I do? And when you're a candidate, you don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to really do, you just have to promise. But having been a mayor and knowing that almost everything costs money, the thing that I've been most concerned about is how to get on the front end of the health care. I was instrumental with another classmate of ours, Bernard Bridges and Louis Sullivan, in the foundation of the Morehouse Medical College. And, and one of the things I wanted them to do was to figure out how to keep people well. Now, I'm afraid they're becoming doctors like all other doctors because there's so many people that are sick that doctors' time is almost all absorbed with dealing with people who are seriously ill. But then I'm reminded of a model of healthcare that I was fascinated with in Costa Rica when I was with the United Nations. And I went with the president of Costa Rica to a neighborhood facility because he said, you know, we don't have an army in Costa Rica in the traditional sense. I want to introduce you to our army. And I went to a very primitive looking building, but there were about 100 of the most beautiful young men and women I had ever seen. And they had very simple white blouses and shirts and blue skirts and trousers. And the president said, this is our army. Each one of these soldiers had a very primitive file cabinet drawer. And there were about 500 families in each of these file cabinets, and they were responsible for the health of those 500 or so people. That may not be the right number. It was a file cabinet about so thick. And what they were responsible for doing was making regular visits, seeing to it that people had all of their immunizations, making sure that if there were need for checkups, periodic checkups, advising the mothers on nutrition, talking with people about family planning and making sure they were taking their birth control pills if they didn't want children. And it was a personal health counselor. We've had a similar model in Atlanta in the Southside Comprehensive Health Center. It was controversial because it was related to Morehouse and Emory. But we had a little revolution, and the neighborhood women took it over, and they became the board, and they then hired the doctors, and the doctors didn't like it at all because they were suddenly working for women who had, some of them, almost no education, but who were obviously every bit as intelligent as the doctors and didn't miss an opportunity to let them know it. It produced an interesting dynamic for a while, a dynamic that made the health care of the community the responsibility of the natural, traditional leaders in the community. And they were more effective in developing programs in the early days when there was money for comprehensive health care than almost anything else I've known about. Another model that I've been personally associated with, both with my father and my brother, both are dentists. And in the old days in Louisiana, we had a series of dental trailers, mobile health units. And so I grew up traveling around with my father in the summertime to rural Louisiana, and he would just pull up to a neighborhood and plug into the electricity and water, and he'd stay there until he fixed everybody's teeth. And there were medical and dental trailers that routinely, New Orleans and Louisiana was a terrible place for tuberculosis in those days, and malaria and all kinds of epidemics. But it was because of the Depression, and doctors weren't making much money. And Huey Long, who you've heard a lot of bad things about, most of which are true, also had a passion for helping poor people. And when he found a whole lot of doctors that were out of work, he put them in these medical units, and we had, for about 5 years in Louisiana, a genuine, massive public health program. I talked to Russell Long, Huey Long's nephew, about that one time, and asked him why he and the Congress didn't really follow in the tradition of his father and make monies available for public health. And I'm not talking about national health insurance now. I'm talking about aggressive public health, that it's reaching epidemic proportions. We don't have enough physicians and nurses anywhere in the United States. And those that we have are desperately overworked. We can't wait until people get sick before we try to deal with the problems. I was in a, what do you call it, perinatal clinic in the Georgia Medical Center last week. And Georgia's catching up with you in that we've got about half of the babies there were crack addicted, and another 20% or so HIV infected. I was told that it cost about $2,000 a day to take care of a baby in that clinic, and they got only the most advanced. I mean, they're doing all kinds of things, and it really makes you cry. It makes you pray. You don't know what to do when you see these helpless little infants. And then, of course, in Grady Hospital, when Mickey Leland's wife gave birth, and Grady was the closest hospital, and we must have, I guess we've gotten Grady not anything compared to you, but when you go into a perinatal clinic and you see 75 to 100 little incubators, and the thing that I never realized was how labor intensive that is, how many people you have to have monitoring these things, how much time it takes with each of these helpless infants that have been brought into the kind of world with, I mean, you and I had a good chance, most of us, and we're just barely making it. What's going to happen to these kids? They're coming into the school system now, and if we were high-strung and nervous and hyperactive, what about these kids who were born with crack addictions? God only knows. And so I think that if there's any message I have to you, it is, out of your experience, make of it an opportunity. Don't accept defeat. And if you don't feel like you can beat the problem here and in an area as large as New York City, at least try to develop a few models that we might try in Georgia. One of the reasons why I want to be governor is that I believe problems can be solved. And I don't believe there's any problem that we can't deal with. I think we can educate children. And if children can learn, a half a dozen rap tunes and repeat them without error, then they can also be taught mathematics. If we took the time that our boys spend shooting basketballs and got them to do anything else, they would be just as good at that as they are at shooting basketballs. But we can also keep people healthy. And I'm not sure how we do it yet, but I would like to see us try. And I would like to see us begin to experiment with different kind of models of health care. Minorities are vulnerable, but minorities are also exciting and challenging. We who make up the minorities have been accustomed to realize that the status quo isn't in our interest. So almost anything new we're ready for. And so I would urge you to try some new things with us. And if you have good ideas that you want to try, and New York is too big, let us know. We'll find someplace in Georgia. Because I think that's the way we change things in America. They're really not changed from the top down. I don't know anything in America, not the civil rights movement, not the war in Vietnam, not the poverty program, not the movement to protect the environment. Nothing that's happened in my lifetime has happened from the top down. It's all started as a grassroots effort. It's all started with people who were determined and dedicated to make a way out of no way. When they really were at the bottom, and when they didn't have a prayer of a chance to do things in traditional ways, they found a new surge of creativity and vision. And they began to break out, and out of their breaking out of the traditional bounds, they created new things. And that's what I hope of you. This is the Easter season and the Passover season. Those are times of miracles. And I'm sure that none of you has gotten so absorbed in your scientific training that you don't believe in miracles anymore. In fact, if there's anything that you learn around constant care around a hospital, is that miracles happen every day, and you're a part of those miracles. And so I would hope we could have a miracle in our healthcare system. I don't know where it's going to come from. I don't know how it's going to come. But I really believe that the people who are most burdened, the people who have the most difficult task, the people who everybody else has given up on, and you all get problems that everybody else doesn't want. And none of the big insurance-covered hospitals will take most of the patients that you get. That's a negative, but it's up to you to turn it into a positive. It's up to you to really develop for this nation a system of delivery of health. And if you can deliver it to the poorest of the poor, to minorities, to people who have little or no support from the rest of the political and economic system, you will know that you've succeeded. And I commend you for your day-to-day struggle, and I really want you to know that I am with you, and I appreciate all that you're doing for us. It wasn't this hospital, but it was a hospital like this in Harlem. And Dr. King used to say when he got stabbed in Harlem, he said, I thank God that I got stabbed in Harlem. Because he said it wasn't any big thing. And he said it was just a routine medical transaction that happens 50, 75 times in any given night. Whereas if I'd been stabbed somewhere else, they might not have known how to handle it. So thank you very, very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mayor Young, for those inspiring words. We have a second speaker today, and our second speaker is also distinguished. The Reverend Dr. Paul Smith is the former Vice Chancellor of Morehouse and former Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at Washington University. He is currently on the faculty of the New York Theological Seminary and Union Theological Center. He is currently pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn Heights, and it's now my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Smith.
I don't mind if you all want to go now, since Andy's he's been here. I'm sorry that that his schedule did not permit for him to be here longer, but when we set this date, which the Honorable Andrew Young, he gave us this date, but he did a mean thing. I'm sorry he's not here, but he had his wife call me to tell me that he had to be on a plane at 3:40 to go back to Atlanta. And if any of you are from the South, you've got to understand that if Andy did not appear in Coweta County, Georgia, and the news got out that he stayed in New York and did not come to Georgia, I'd probably have to make him the assistant pastor at First Church. I just really want to just let me take just a couple of minutes to emphasize some of the things that Andy has indicated. Number one is that here he is indeed a person who has been mostly responsible for my own journey. I went to Hartford Seminary, where Andy went to a seminary while I was a college student in Alabama. Andy came and really got me fired up about the civil rights movement. And he also is responsible for me actually telling perhaps one of the greatest stories to my in-laws, who were not my in-laws at that time, because my wife, who's my wife now, on her way back from Europe, and we were to get married in about 90 days, so we sort of hung out in New York when her plane got in from Zurich. And unbeknownst to us, she missed the flight from New York to Los Angeles, where her parents were meeting her. So I said, Andy, I do want to get married to this woman, but you've got to call out to Los Angeles and explain to my future in-laws why their daughter missed this plane, which he did, and 60 days later I got married. Now, on a more serious note, our topic has to do with how can you as an institution, a medical institution, begin to do more than you're already doing with regard to minority health issues. And one of the things I'd like to just try out on you is that so often we as pastors particularly feel very much intimidated and cut off from you here in the hospital. And much of that has to do with our own misunderstanding, but a lot of it has to do with our feeling of not being a part of the, quote, the team. That gets exacerbated when you start speaking about the minority community, which also may feel a bit estranged from the medical institution. So how do we get around that? And Andy made reference to the Morehouse Medical School. And while it is true that a great portion of the student body at the medical school are indeed ethnic minorities, the reality is that the mission of that school is very different. And its mission, by intention, is to lift up the issues that particularly affect minority people. And so the school is located in an area that is not dissimilar to this area. And there is a real relationship between the people who reside in the housing project that surrounds not only the Morehouse Medical College, but also the Atlanta University Center. And if any of you have been there, you know that. And so there is a feeling that the people who are at Morehouse College and at the School of Medicine have a concern about them. Not only do they have a concern, but they know something about their illnesses. And it seems to me that here in New York City, that we can really do better than we are doing now. That there are some ways we've got to find how we can relate to the issues that affect minorities in this city, so we can feel that we are actually doing something of significance and that there is a legitimate concern on the part of the medical institution. How do we do this? Well, again, as Andy Young has said, I don't really know, but what I do believe is that we need not, as ethnic minorities, be as frightened as we are of each other. And how do we get beyond that? We get beyond that, I think, by finding ways in which we can break down the barriers that exist between us. Let me give an example. In Brooklyn Heights, there were some concerns about what happened to children from private schools when they were leaving. There was this group of kids coming into the neighborhood. So the first response from the association was they sent out this circular that said, any group of black and Hispanic kids, watch out for. These are the kids that are attacking our children. So how does that make black and Hispanic children feel? It means that they can't congregate because they are, quote, suspect. It's like I asked a white guy for the time the other day, and he gave me his watch. You know. Now, I think you understand what I mean. So when you have these kinds of barriers, it makes it very difficult for you to have some kind of understanding of who I am and what I'm involved with, and begin to hear the kinds of concerns that I'm having. So we've got to find ways to get beyond that. And again, as I look out into this audience, as we did at the Harbor Club just 45 minutes ago, the reason that I follow Andy Young around is because he seriously believes in the Rainbow Coalition. And as I look out into this audience, you are indeed the Rainbow Coalition. And when we can begin to break down the barriers that exist between us, and we can feel a bit more comfortable than we feel now, then we can really get at some of the issues that divide us. The other situation is and if you look at the paradigm of a deep sea diver, the deep sea diver moves through what is called 3 phases. The first level is what they call the belt of the fishes. The second level is called the abyss of darkness. And then the third level is called the luminous darkness. As you look around this audience today, we are at the level of the belt of the fishes, because we are a mixture of different colors, races, ethnic backgrounds, and what have you, and we feel a bit comfortable at this level. And the reason we feel comfortable, because there's not really a whole lot going on. There's nothing really demanded of you. Come from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, 5 to 11, whatever it is, and everything's cool at this level. And so the diver feels fairly secure. But this is perhaps the most dangerous level, because we make assumptions at this level without really trying to discover that there may be some very wonderful differences, and that I might begin to understand you better if I were willing to move to the next level, which is called the belt of the fishes. I mean, the abyss of darkness. And so the diver gets to this level, and he sees darkness at the bottom, he sees light at the top. So there's some ambivalence. And so again, as you look at this in terms of the communities, we look at the community that surrounds this hospital, and we say, maybe I'll just sort of walk into one of these places and see what it's like in here. That's the level of the abyss of darkness. You're not so sure you ought to be there, because you may be outnumbered, or you may not look like whom else is in there. The diver's in this kind of position and says, maybe I better go back to the belt of the fishes, where everybody looks like me, and we're all smiling, and we're shaking one another's hands, and we feel good. But if the diver decides to move to the third level, which he calls the luminous darkness, he begins to discover at that level that, if in this case it's blackness, that it's okay to be black at this level. It's okay to be white at this level. And so when you're at this level in terms of relationships with people, then you are not afraid to ask some of the hard questions. Someone said to me, when you're having an event like this for Andy Young, you have to do a lot of things, and a lot of people are involved, and tempers get a little high. And so someone made a comment. And so I got 4 phone calls saying, I don't want to be a part of this because you have a racist person in your church. And I said, well, what's new? There are a lot of racist people in my church. So the reality is that we were working to try to do some things for Andy Young, and we were doing that fine until this one comment was made that indeed was racist. So I told the guy to apologize and get the hell out of the program, which he did. And it was fine. But if every time something is said that is deemed racist or sexist or exclusive, how do you get on with the business? It's very, very difficult. And so you've got to have some thick skins and to understand that, yes, I'm going to make some mistakes sometimes. Every time I preach, I put a disclaimer out, because I'm going to offend someone. So if you want to really get at the issues of health within the minority community, you've got to understand that you want to move to a level of the luminous darkness, where you begin to understand that you'll take a few hits. There will be some accusations made, but if we're in it together, then we can certainly make some headway. Let me close with this. I'm really new to New York, and I don't know a lot of things about this city, but you have this slogan in New York, I love New York. You know that? Well, if you love New York, why aren't you kinder? If you love New York, why don't you speak to people on the street? If you love New York, why don't you reach out and touch somebody's hand, as Aretha Franklin says? Why do you have to be so nasty? Simply because it means, you are really a New Yorker if you are, quote, nasty. Now think about this for a moment. You speak to somebody and they're shocked because you have extended some kindness. And I don't want to be cavalier about this, but I want to be very clear that if your attitude in this hospital and in this medical school is open and gentle and you're not naive and you do care, do you realize what could happen to this place? If you walk down one of these corridors and you just weren't on the person's case all the time, or you say, oh, there goes that Hispanic person, or there goes that. Do you realize what you could do about the mental health of all of us in this place? One more story. I sneak over here every now and then in Dr. Moreno's program. And, I can understand your attitudes on Monday. It's been a little hard weekend and so forth. But when I come here on Wednesday, I expect at least a smile. There's no excuse for not having a smile on Wednesday, and it's certainly by Thursday. So what I'm saying is that if we're all here together and we're trying to understand the job that we have to do, not only in this city, but particularly in this hospital, so we can get at the issues that affect minorities, then I think we will have indeed done a very important thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those, and don't think we won't. Thank you for those kinder and gentler and inspiring words, Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith is willing to take some questions if folks have some that you'd like to raise with him. Any questions? Yes, please. The question is the ruling that the FDA made with regard to not utilizing Haitian blood for blood banks in light of the AIDS, the possibility of AIDS. Dr. Smith.
I obviously think that it's a very awful decision, but I think it's again indicative of the things that I was saying there. There's so much that we don't know. There's so much homophobia. There's the suspect syndrome again. So how do we begin to turn around the FDA, for example? What are the ways in which we can begin to, quote, educate them? And again, I'm like Andy, because Andy is really indeed my mentor. I think workshops need to be held with the FDA. We need to get their attention. I think there needs to be a coming together of Haitians and Afro-Americans and whites together so we can begin to say how awful that decision is by the FDA. And you know what? It could really begin right here with this institution.
Some other questions? No? Nobody? Well, let me ask Dr. Moreno to join us to close our meeting.
I just want to point out that, pardon my laryngitis, that Dr. Smith is a member of the advisory board for our little medical humanities program, and that is a connection that was made by my assistant director, Kathy Powderly, and without that, we wouldn't have had the exciting hour that we've had. We're very grateful to you, Dr. Smith, for making it possible for somebody like Andrew Young to be here. Since I've been working in Brooklyn for a year and a half, I'm impressed at how far Brooklyn sometimes seems from the rest of the world. Andrew Young has his presence here makes us a bit closer and reminds us that people are really interested in what we're doing out here. Thank you.